All right.
I've been together for 23 years, married the last 14.
Welcome, everyone. As you're coming in, if you don't mind, please put yourself on mute. Feel free to join the video or not, as you like. Sarah Smith says she's on her way to your house, Justin.
Yeah, that's not mine. That's the wine.
Oh my God. I was like, that's like a really amazing setup. I thought you were like in your basement. I was like, so that's some goals.
No, if we were doing this in my house, you wouldn't see me with our internet. So.
And Megan, if you don't mind, just keeping an eye on the waiting room.
Yeah.
We'll just give it one more minute. We had about 65 people register for the event, so we're excited to welcome so many of you today. Oh boy. Okay, well, I think a fair number of people are here. Welcome, everyone. My name is Eileen Sevier, and I'm the VP of Strategy and Marketing at Early Mountain, and also have the pleasure of curating and pulling together all of the wines for this club. It is so much fun, and really, this club came out of Zoom conversations like this. Because as many of you know, during the height of COVID, we were hosting weekly webinars with an array of other wineries and just had so much fun having those conversations and choosing wines for those tastings that we decided it would be a ton of fun to turn it into a club. And it truly is a pleasure, traveling throughout the state, meeting with lots of winemakers, tasting through tons of different bottlings, and selecting the wines that are part of the shipment. So I hope you love them as much as I do. Really try to always find a wonderful diversity that each tell a story, and a story, of course, about the winery itself, but also a story about what's happening in Virginia wine. All of the excitement, people really pushing the envelope with different approaches in the winery, people really making beautifully age-worthy wines, people celebrating their family. And there's a lot of that represented in the club today. So really the goal for this tasting, we have these 6 winemakers who made these wines on the call with us, are people who greatly contributed to them. And each of them have the 6 wines in the shipment. So we're gonna taste through each and really kind of share the story, of course, directly from each winemaker, but also have a chance for each of the winemakers to talk about, their colleagues' wines. So we always have a lot of fun doing it, and please feel free, drop questions in the chat, jump in. This is meant to really be a conversation around, what we love about what's happening in Virginia. So to start out, we'll just quickly go through, and each of the winemakers is going to introduce themselves. But before we do that, I wanted to call out Megan Rains, who's on the call with us. And she's our wonderful club manager, our community manager. She does an incredible job, answering all your emails, getting your wines out to you. And she's the person to always, call and email if you need anything. So
yes, absolutely.
Give it a shout out, Megan.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a real pleasure getting to know so many of you guys over the last year, since taking this position and learning so much about these different vineyards from this club and from our other club personally. It's been awesome, and you guys make it so much fun. So I'm excited to get to be a part of this with y'all today.
Cool. And we'll just, guys, if you can jump in and introduce yourselves in the order of the wines we're tasting. So starting with the Cana Rosé, Melanie, if you want to say hi.
Hi, I'm Melanie from Cana Vineyards up in Middleburg in Loudoun County. I'm the winemaker, vineyard manager, and a handful of other things up there.
Yeah. Justin?
Hi, I'm Justin Rose, winemaker at Rosemont Vineyards, and we're kind of located in Southside Virginia, in between Richmond and Raleigh, North Carolina, on Lake Gaston.
Awesome. Rachel?
Yeah, Rachel from Stinson Vineyards. We're in the Monticello AVA in Whitehall, Virginia.
And Maya?
Maya White from Early Mountain Vineyards. I'm the associate winemaker and viticulturalist there. And so we're located about 30 minutes north of Charlottesville.
Cool. And the Rausse crew?
Hi, I'm Peter Rausse. I'm Tim Rausse.
I'm Kitten.
And we're in Charlottesville, so near Rachel, with better internet.
And Daniele.
Hi, my name is Daniele, and I'm assistant winemaker at Barbourville Vineyards in Barbourville, Virginia, Monticello AVA.
Wonderful. Well, getting right into the wines, I'm thrilled that we're starting with two different versions of rosé. I personally love rosé, but I think Melanie might love it even more than I do. Before I pass it over to her, I just want to really give Melanie an extraordinary congratulations. In case anyone on this call, I'm guessing you all already know, but if you don't, one of her wines, she had two wines in the governor's case, and won the governor's cup this year. So really a big congrats. And but we're really focusing on your love of rosé here tonight. And when I found out that you make not just one, not just two, but in this vintage, 3 different rosés, each of which I believe celebrate a different grape variety, I was so intrigued to try them. And we selected your Cabernet Franc bottling, which is also one of my favorite grapes. But I'd love to hear more about kind of your journey with rosé and how you found working with Cabernet Franc for this wine.
Yeah, so if anyone has met me and talked to me about wine, I have talked to them about rosé. That's definitely kind of my thing, my biggest passion as a winemaker. I've been, trying to work with rosé for several years now. There are times that I kick myself and say, why did that have to be my favorite wine? Because as sometimes simple and pretty as it can seem sometimes, it's really fussy in the cellar. So it's not an easy wine to make. So when we pull it off and it looks really pretty and simple, there's a lot that went behind that. Like Eileen mentioned, I have 3 rosés now. So at Cana, I've been making the Merlot rosé since I've been there in 2015. 3 years ago, I added Cab Sauv. This is the very first year for this Cab Franc rosé. I'm really excited about it. I had the opportunity to pick up the fruit. It's from the Shenandoah Valley AVA. So I purchased the fruit from Lee at Bluestone. Each of my 3 rosés, besides being a different varietal, are coming from a very different part of the state as well, which has been really fun to work with. I didn't know exactly what to expect from Cab Franc. I haven't had too many in Virginia, at least produced not in a Saunier method, so an early pick kind of style. I've had quite a few from the Finger Lakes that I really like, so I know it can be done. And yeah, this is my first go at it. We brought the fruit in early so that the flavors were on the lighter side. The acid was bright. The color is something that I love. This is like a color of rosé I may not have put in front of consumers a few years ago because it hardly has much color to it, but some of my favorites from Provence will be in this hue. And if you see all three of mine lined up, we're all different colors. This is the palest one. It's 100% Cab Franc. I just stem it and crush it very lightly before I press it. This was all fermented in stainless, but I did age about 20% of it in mutual barrel for a short time after. I'm really trying with this third rosé in the portfolio to try to give it a little bit more roundness, a little more body, a little more structure without being heavy or something that won't mesh with the lighter fruit tones. So it was just two barrels that had been in my Chardonnay program for this vintage. Next year, I'm pulling in a brand new puncheon, which is a larger barrel, so a 500-liter barrel to get some new oak, but hopefully not too aggressive, and just a few gentle oak notes in there to kind of build out that body a little bit. Don't let me keep talking about rosé. I'll do it all night.
And so you said that you weren't sure what to expect. And so you picked pretty early. And what I love about this is the vibrancy of it, that it seems to really take that raspberry character that I love in, full red Cabernet Franc and give it that wonderful kind of precision. That there's the herbal notes that I feel like it's Cabernet Franc, but at the same time, that's very much in check. It's very integrated with the wine. But I'd love to hear our winemakers jump in if anyone has any thoughts or questions.
Melanie, I was going to ask you about the color on this. Like the moment we tasted it, I was just like, that is so beautiful. So, was it what you expected, or, were you kind of shooting in this direction, or just kind of seeing what the fruit was going to give you?
Yeah, it was kind of let's see what it will do. I mean, I tried, I'm really gentle with my fruit. I want to get some color from the skin, but I don't want a lot of other things that can come from the skin. So it's a short time. It's going to touch it. It's a little bit of a press to get it off. And I'm hoping I can hold enough color doing that without grabbing anything else I want. And it had a lot more color as juice. And it's interesting, especially when it's a paler rosé you ferment, you lose so much of it during fermentation. And I honestly was a little nervous every step of the way. I'm like, oh, there goes more. There goes more. And it was kind of, it was scaring me a little bit. I'm really happy with where the finished wine is. I'm like, you know what? It's good. It lines up next to the other two as the first one. So yeah, I didn't know. I thought maybe it'd be a little darker. I've had some from the Finger Lakes that are, but I know that they soak more in the skins, and I didn't want to risk that.
Well, it is absolutely beautiful, and it is very striking in this lineup.
Thank you.
I also feel like this is a rosé that screams food, that almost kind of demands that you put something delicious with it. Different kind of summer fare for sure. Anyone from the club who's had a chance to try it, jump into the chat or unmute and share your thoughts.
I was going to ask, you said food, and based on the notes, we were getting our shipment late. So I'm going by, I haven't had a chance to try, spoiler alert, I have not had a chance to try anything because we joined super late. And so I think we got like the shipment a little late. So everything is coming to us probably tomorrow, but I want to know pairings because I'm a super huge foodie of like what to do. And it sounds like based on what you said, Melanie, that you could go a couple of different directions, but the thing that popped in my head was maybe like a scallop crudo with like some like really bright acid notes and like a cracked black pepper and maybe a little bit of microgreens or rhubarb or something like that. But that's in my head based on the notes. But what would you pair this with?
Well, first, will you make that for me?
Yeah, Sarah, I want to join you for dinner.
No. So I don't cook. I'm the person that conceptualizes. My husband's the execution person. He's fantastic. He's like, I don't ever want to open my own restaurant because I know how much work that is. But like, we just like to nerd out and be like, what can we go do for us and our friends? And so when you were saying this, I was like, oh, I feel like I really, really, really want to lead into this like super huge like rhubarb kick that I'm dying for rhubarb season right now. And so and that's where I want it. But I feel like I'm just bringing my own, I want to do this, so I want to hear what you would do with it.
Yeah, sure. I don't think the rhubarb is a bad idea, right? Because that's something that's like kind of like a red note to it, but it's really bright too. So I feel like that could pair nicely. I think you're going to good track with the scallops. You know, it's like a lighter seafood, scallops, shrimp. My favorite thing in the world with rosé is goat cheese, though. It's also one of my favorite things in the world to eat. So I mean, goat cheese and rosé is kind of all I need to be happy. But it's a nice. I mean, it would be a beautiful pairing with this too. I have some local goat cheese that has it's a fresh chev with some ramp mixed in. So we're real seasonal, we're real springtime, and that's kind of a perfect pairing for this right now. So yeah, you can play with that herbal note in there a little bit. Don't go too strong, but it's holding up to the ramp. So I guess maybe you could. Lighter fare. I think anything Mediterranean, right? Like you would with most rosés.
Oh, thank you. Actually, there's a place up by us in Clifton called Trumer's that used to do a rhubarb. It's funny that you say that, a rhubarb and goat cheese ravioli with Meyer lemon. And like, I'm like, oh, yours plus mine. That's where it should be.
Well, great. Now
Yeah,
we all need to
perfect.
take a pause, go cook or eat something and come back. No, but thank you, Melanie. And I really, bravo, love this wine. So staying with rosé, but adding bubbles. So kind of upping the ante as far as the fun factor. Moving to Justin at Rosemont. This is truly, this extra dry brut has been one of my favorite wines. Have drunk it for years. So tell us a bit about it, Justin.
Yeah, so this is our fourth vintage of our sparkling rosé. It's 100% Chambourcin. We've had Chambourcin in our vineyard since we planted it in 2003, and we've always made a dry rosé with it since 2007. Then I noticed that basically these grapes might be perfect to do a bubbles, a sparkling with. So we tried it in 2017. The numbers were perfect. The one unique thing about the Chambourcin grape is that you actually get color out of its pulp and not just from its skin. So this is direct press, meaning that the grapes go straight in, which is how we do all our rosés with Chambourcin. Clusters go straight into the press, direct press, kind of on a light cycle, called like a champagne cycle. I'm only using like the first 65% of the juice that comes out for the sparkling wine. The rest we'll use for something else. And so I just want really nice, clean juice, make really fruit forward. We'll age it about a year, and then we'll go into our Charmant tank, which is a pressure tank where we'll ferment, let it sit for a month, chill it down, and then bottle. Uniquely, you may see we do it unfiltered with zero dosage. So it's a brut nature. There's no sugar on this at all. No dosage, which you could put in at the end when you bottle it. So it's just been kind of a unique wine that's kind of been something we played around with, and it's now growing into a wine that we're doing a lot more of. Unique thing about 2020 for us is that we got frosted and actually got down to freezing in May really hard. So we lost a lot of our Chambourcin. So this is a first vintage where it's not our fruit, it's actually Chambourcin from Home Place Vineyards, which is down here in Southside Virginia, and also Bro Vineyards, which is up in Northern Virginia. So I think was really unique and kind of cool for me to see is that using still Chambourcin, but fruit from around the state, we still could do a style that is very similar to what we've done in the past, if not basically the same. One thing we try to do down here at Rosemont is be all estate, because we want to showcase kind of what Southside Virginia can do. But again, in 2020, we had the unfortunate incident where we lost a lot of fruit. And so we ended up sourcing it for this, but turned out basically the same as what we've always had, which I thought was really cool. So.
Yeah, and so Chambourcin's a grape that we work with a bit at Early Mountain. I know a number of wineries around the state. Do you want to just quickly speak to, so it's a multi-vitis grape variety. It's a French-American marriage.
Yes, all those terms. Yeah, it's, we planted it initially we work with Lucy Morton. We've been with her since 1999 when we thought about doing this. She's a really great viticulturist, and she suggested Chambourcin for rosé, which is what we've always done. So it's a great grape. I mean, technically, we did it organically. Not this vintage, we sourced it, but we half of our fields are doing that just because it's a grape that's grows for us beautifully in the vineyard. Very little to like zero maintenance. Also, we're picking up for rosé, so we're picking early, and so we have don't really have any issues to deal with. Great crop load, beautiful fruit, and stylistically, it's I think it's got great aromatics, and it's just been for me a great grape to work with, and been able to do a lot of fun things. More again, all on the rosé side, but really been kind of a staple for us in our wines is using Chambourcin for rosé, and now also sparkling rosé.
So Melanie, I have to kick it to you as our resident rosé expert. What do you think?
So, after rosé, I also have a great love for bubbles. So, when you put the two things together, I'm going to be very happy. This is very nice. I will tell you that Chambourcin's it's not a grape that's my favorite for rosé production. I don't always like where it goes, but I've seen more and more recently that are really nice. And I think this is beautiful. So very nice.
Justin, do you have to remove any color?
No. The key to me, and even with our dry rosé, is the press fractions, because as you go longer into that press cycle, as you're getting more and more juice off, it's going to become darker and darker. So even like our press fraction rosés are as dark as some of these reds. Now it'll fall out a little bit throughout fermentation, but that's why I'm pretty meticulous on press cuts. So we actually will do, this gets into the nerdy winemaking geeky side, but in our rosé production, we'll have anywhere from 3 to 4 different lots within the amount of grapes that comes in. So 3 to 4 different press cuts that will all ferment separately. Some of the harder presses will go into neutral oak, stylistically what I'm looking for. Those usually don't go into our rosés though. And so
what do you ferment the
I'm sorry?
free run in?
It's all stainless steel.
Okay.
All stainless steel. So yeah. Maybe eventually try some concrete eggs like I know you work with, but right now it's just all steel.
Yeah, they're not temperature controlled, so probably
Right.
wouldn't be good for sparkling.
Yeah, I mean that's the key. With rosé, I cooler temperatures, long fermentations, and then I do a little bit of obviously this sits a year before we bottle it, so it sits on its lees or its dead yeast cells for a year to add some body to it too. So.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to jump in, ask questions about the Rosemont rosé? Oh, well, Sarah's interested in your food recommendation too.
What we were trying to go with both this, we do 2 different sparkling, is just everyday drinking, just for fun, but also pairing. I think it handles stuff like some saltiness. So we've done stuff with so kind of where we're at, like Virginia ham, and like a biscuit, country biscuit. I know we did one before with we were on the lake here, we had a pizza oven. So like a pizza with like prosciutto and arugula could be a nice pairing. I think we did that before. Obviously salads, but something with some saltiness I think would actually be really nice with this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It has such a strawberry character to it and kind of a dark cherry. So you can almost think of it as playing that role, like dried fruit almost on a charcuterie board.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So Rachel, you're up next. Do you think you're
okay? How's the sound now?
Yeah,
I'm only on my phone. Good. Okay.
Perfect. And really fast, I just want to say I'm so honored. I'm really honored that all of the wines in the shipment, that you all were willing to give us some of your precious cases. But this wine especially, because I don't know if you guys were immediately struck by the label the same way I was. But wine to me is always so magical because it's celebrating a certain snapshot in time. And this particular bottling was celebrating the birth of Rachel and Nathan's daughter. So even more special that they shared these cases with all of us.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
you
Thank you,
are
Rachel.
actually
Oh,
the
sorry.
reason that we bottled this one when we did, because I probably wouldn't have, but you were looking for something for the shipment, and I think that was the reason that we bottled it in March. So
Yeah.
it exists. The label exists because of you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, tell us more about it.
Yeah, so 2020, we also lost, had almost total loss of our vineyard, our estate grapes. And we, so, I mean, we were basically starting from scratch, just with the usual growers that we contract with, that fared a little bit better than we did in 2020. And so we had some extra Sauvignon Blanc from Grace Estate. And then we were able to actually source some Semillon from Trump, which, as far as I know, is, if not the only one of the few vineyards growing Semillon in Virginia. So we'd never worked with it, but we thought, there's whites on the market. Why don't we try something with that? And because there were very few reds on the market that year, we wound up doing a white Bordeaux instead of a red Bordeaux. We didn't want to skip a Meritage year. And then, of course, we had to have a wine for Betty, who is our youngest daughter, who was born in 2020. And we like to bottle a Jeroboam, which is 3 liters, I think. 3-liter bottles. Can you hear me? Oh, and so we like to bottle Jeroboams of them and let make our kids drink them when they're 21 is the plan, and then they'll never want to drink wine ever again. But so yeah, we decided to do a Meritage Blanc for her, and this is the wine. If you haven't opened it already, I do think it needs some more age. I think.
Okay, I think we lost Rachel. Oh, here she comes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I had another call coming in. So I think that it probably will be in a good place in like early July. So if you can, I would hold it until then. But yeah, this was a chance to do kind of a more barrel aged style of Sauvignon Blanc and throw in the Semillon so that it's not quite so Sauv Blanc-y. We like our Sauv Blanc in a really like fresh green style. And sometimes that's a little off-putting for people. So with this, we added in the Semillon, which is a little bit more of a neutral grape, contributes like body and a little bit more of like the marzipan flavors. And then of course we did it in oak, and we actually added in some new oak too, to try to mimic the style of a white Bordeaux.
Yeah, well, it definitely has the richness, that combination of that kind of vanilla cream, like it's almost like lemon and cream pie. I mean, totally dry, of course. So I feel like it very much captures that feeling of a really high-end white Bordeaux. And so with the character and the vibrancy of it, is this a wine that you think, could you put it away for 21 years?
I hope so. I don't know. I can't make any promises for 21 years. Oh, sorry. For 21 years from now, but it'll probably all be vinegar anyways. But our goal was that it would be age worthy, since we're presenting it as a white Bordeaux.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has an incredible amount of concentration and richness and really, really wonderful texture to it. I'd love for the other winemakers to jump in and share some thoughts.
I think it's a great wine. I love the body on it, the viscosity. What's the percentage of Semillon in the blend?
I think it's 57%.
Okay, so it's more Semillon than, okay.
Yeah.
And that was done in oak too?
Yeah, we well, initially the Sauvignon Blanc was done in concrete, and then we blended it and put it back in barrel to age. And then I specifically also bought like a Taranto barrel that was the white Bordeaux toast for this, because there was like nothing else to do in 2020. So I figured we might as well have fun with it. So hopefully that oak with some age winds up coming through a little more nuanced.
I think the oak's really pretty on it. I mean, it's this wonderful, as I said, that like vanilla cream. I think with the concentration, you can definitely see that there's going to be additional layers. But I think it's showing beautifully right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maya, I know this is the style of wine that you really love. What do you think of it?
I do. I love barrel aged Sauvignon Blanc. So yeah, I was curious about the new oak, and then you broached that because it integrates so nicely and so seamlessly.
Yeah, that was a new experience for me. Oak aging the Sauvignon Blanc, or at least a percentage of it. But I liked it.
Do you think you'll do it again or keep doing it a small bit? Or
I don't know. Our Sauvignon Blanc is stainless steel and concrete, and I don't think there's a place for oak in it, but who knows? It just kind of depends on what the vintage gives you.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing that's fun about this wine, is that it doesn't sound as if you're necessarily going to make it again. But it's really a pretty unique style, a unique snapshot, in some ways a way of responding to what was a tough vintage for many winemakers, with creativity and ingenuity, as we all did.
Yeah, definitely. And kudos to Trump for growing this varietal. I honestly don't think I will ever try to work with it again in Virginia, because I won't tell you what the bricks were, but they were pretty far under 20. And like a normal alcohol level is like 22 to 24. So 2020 was a difficult year, and it was definitely a difficult year for Semillon.
That's interesting though, because in like Hunter Valley, when they're picking Semillon and picking it really early, I wonder I don't know, I'd be curious what they're harvesting it at.
Yeah, the skins are pretty thin too, so it doesn't hold up very well.
Got it. So for anyone who has popped it, any thoughts to share from the club? Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing this with us. I will say, Megan, I was kind of thinking you were going to jump in, because Megan has a lot of excitement, and she and one of our events managers.
Yeah, well, when I just hearing the story of this wine, I immediately because I had a daughter at the beginning of 2021, and my first thought was like, wow, Rachel's really up in the bar for good parenting, having these, like, I wish I could have made a wine for my daughter. And like, I just thought that was so cool. And the label and the story behind everything I thought was incredible. And I love that you guys do that for each of your kids. I think that's just, absolutely the coolest thing.
This is the last one, so it's done.
Really on that.
Well, before we shift to Maya, I also did want to give you a shout out to Rachel, with your Meritage. Was it the 2017? Was selected as Governor's Case wine this vintage. So top 12 wines of the year. So really awesome. And perhaps you'll enter this one a year or two down the road as well.
Thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. So if Semillon is hard to grow in Virginia, we'll shift to a grape that I feel like the more there's tough vintages, the more Petit Manseng goes in the ground. And it's a grape that just seems made for our climate and our soils. And it's a grape I love. It's a grape Maya loves. But we don't often make it in a demi-sec bottling. The last time we did was in 2017. And really it's because, we work a lot with native fermentations at Early Mountain. And so sometimes they want to be demi-sec, sometimes they don't. But Maya, can you tell us more about this wine?
Yes, definitely. So I realized like with the last two wines, we also got hit with a lot of cold in 2020 and we lost by chance our Petit Manseng. So as much as we're like, this grows really well for us, 2020 was just a little much for everything. So this particular bottling, we were able to source fruit from Glen Manor Vineyards. So up in Front Royal, they have a really interesting and exciting site, very aggressive slopes up to 35 degrees, very, very rocky soils as well. And he grows a variety of different, fruit and doesn't typically, sell much of it, but he had some Petit Manseng to sell in 2020. So we ended up getting a small bit, and this, it's a very simple approach. Like we don't add any sulfur to any of our Petit Mansengs as juice. So we put it in barrel. It was a neutral 500 liter barrel, and we just let it ferment ambient. So it takes so long to do that, to the point of we actually came up with bottling this wine as a style back in 17 because we had one barrel that was just never finishing. We're like, tastes pretty good. I bet we could put this in a bottle. And that kind of started the trend of, let's find some exciting fruit to do this and kind of embrace that acidity while, leaving a little bit of the residual sugar. So this was actually bottled in March of 2022, and it was pretty much fermenting up until I would say December of 2021. So it's just this low and slow, fermentation kinetic. And I think what I happen to like, and it's taken us many years to get comfortable with that kind of long and somewhat terrifying fermentation, like something's going to go wrong, this is a really low pH wine. So the juice came in at around 26 degrees Brix. It was about 2.9 pH, and the finished wine still has about 2.9 pH, so really aggressive acidity. Typically, if you're looking at sparkling wines, that's anywhere between like 2.9 and 3.1 for a base. Oftentimes white wines are like in that 3.1, 3.5 range, depending. So this is aggressive, which kind of balances some of the remaining sugar here. So it's a little bit more residual sugar than we've seen in the last bottling, but there's no, it just stops when it stops. And in this case, it's about 60 grams as well. But yeah, so some of the aromatics you're getting, and what I like about how we work with Petit Manseng, and we've kind of finally come around to this technique, is, these slow fermentations, you're getting more of these autolytic characters. So like in the winter, yeast is very seasonal and it just kind of stops fermenting. So in the spring, it kind of revs back up again. So all this like starting and stopping fermentation is giving you some of that autolytic character that you're typically seeing in other wines, like sparkling wines, for example, like in the bottle aging. So when you're smelling it, that kind of yeasty ready character is coming from the yeast and all that extended lees contact. It's very much Petit Manseng on its own. Petit Manseng can be so, bold in its pineapple attributes. I think this is kind of more of a dried pineapple, lemon curd, kind of clover and stony character to it. But yeah, it's truly nothing was redone. This was, I want to say, the laziest approach to. We put it in a barrel and we, keep checking on it occasionally and keep our fingers and toes crossed. So yeah, and I tend to ramble, so feel free to throw questions out because I'll just keep talking.
Well, one thing I just want to acknowledge, and I know, there's people here very familiar with French wines. And so we labeled this demi-sec, even though it's about 50 grams of residual, which is higher than a typical like Vouvray demi-sec. But when we were really tasting the balance of the acid and the sugar, we really felt like that was the right place to put it, to capture kind of that feeling. So to me, even though, yes, there is some sweetness to this wine, it's so vibrant that it still makes me, going back to the food pairing question that I'm anticipating, it still makes me think more savory than sweet, more towards the kind of sweeter, meatier fishes like kind of a swordfish or something of that nature. But would love to hear the other winemakers' thoughts and any questions you guys might have.
I'll chime in here because I'm a big Petit Manseng fan. I love it. And I know there's lots of different styles to make it. And I think sometimes some winemakers are trying to kind of work the Petit Manseng out of Petit Manseng in the cellar because it is pretty bold and sometimes it's too much. I never think it is. I think it's fantastic. The acid is amazing. There are a lot of wines that we struggle to have acid with in Virginia. So when we have something that comes in like that, it can be a challenge to work with, but I always embrace it, and I'm excited to see it come in the cellar that way because it's something that has plenty of acid. And this is my favorite style of Petit Manseng. I don't drink a whole lot of sweet wine, but the balance with the acid and the sweetness is just so beautiful. Like I think I think it's a sweet spot for Petit Manseng. It's beautiful.
Well, good. It's definitely more of like exciting fruit from a site versus anything we did, which I think is kind of notable for that variety in a way, because it's one that we all talk about like, oh, it's easy to grow in Virginia and that's great. And again, like shamelessly, I love growing it in Virginia, except when it gets mercilessly walloped by cold and we somehow eventually lose it. But it really has a like less disease pressure. And so people tend to put it in the more challenging spots in the vineyard. So when you have it in a really exciting spot and you kind of see how it can shine in its own way, and yes, like it is aggressive. If you're like, I'm going to make a dry Petit Manseng, probably not from that fruit. But, if you want to just explore sites, I think, it tends to sometimes get the shaft for, valid reasons, but it's exciting to see cool sites with it.
Awesome. And Maya, I do feel like you like to emphasize how easy it is to be a winemaker and you can just be lazy with it. I somehow don't think that's quite the case.
Really didn't. There's nothing added as juice. We do a mild press cycle. We played around a lot of different, with different press cycles, just with Petit Manseng being so aggressive, what makes sense. Hard pressing to get a little bit more from the skin and kind of shift your pH. This was a very mild, gentle press cycle. So really trying to keep that pH low, which aids in some of the microbial character. We do a very oxidative approach to juice. So we're letting our juice brown. And then as it starts fermenting, it kind of clears up. In this case, sometimes we take an ambient starter. So, keg we put outside and then bring it back in. And, if it tastes good, we're putting it in another lot. So we just kind of let go. So yeah, there is something slightly nerve-wracking, but, every year we kind of, at the beginning of harvest, have to get more comfortable with it. And then we just let it ride. And I'll say, I think obviously I'm listed on here, but Ben Jordan obviously contributed quite a bit to this wine, equally, if not more. So.
Absolutely. And we're kind of all the Petit Manseng fan society. We still, every time we talk about it, we're like, we need to make t-shirts for this. And I promise I will do that. Awesome. Well, moving to the reds and Vino del Bosco, as I said, one of the fun parts of this club is getting to journey around and visit new wineries and meet with new folks. And, just really absolutely loved visiting the Gabriele Rausse winery because there's this wonderful feeling of peace and being in the woods. And for those of you who haven't been to the tasting room, please go visit because it just has this wonderful escape feel to it. And the gorgeous label on this wine, I feel, really brings to life that feeling of sitting in the woods. So guys, I'd love to hear from you all about this wine.
Sure. Move that so you can see it if you're on the Zoom. So it's the label is a woodblock done by our friend Ali Kelly, and she does a different woodblock for each vintage and also for each varietal that we do for the Vino del Bosco line. And then I combine it with different washes that she does. And so there's a sort of a watercolor wash done with natural dyes and then a woodblock. And that's the basis of our labels. And she's always doing really beautiful woodland scenes, which I really love. And she has a special way of of depicting the forest, and it fit the Vino del Bosco, meaning wine from the woods. It fit that aesthetic really nicely.
Stylistically, growing up making wine with Gabriele, we would often make reds that were not oak aged. And really, throughout Italy, you can still find quite a bit of wine that's produced, if not in stainless steel, in wood vessels that are so old that you're not getting any of the tannins from the oak. The idea of the toasted French barrique, and it's sort of becoming the paradigm of red wine, is relatively new in most parts of Italy. So we always made this style of wine, but we always added sulfites. So when we started doing the Vino del Bosco label, in order to avoid sort of the microbial dangers of a barrel, but also to highlight the fruit aromas and flavors of the wine, we decided to not make it with any oak at all. So there's no tannin addition, there's no oak chips, there's no barrels at all, just the fruit and some ketazan. So we do use some products to help add stability to it because we're not using sulfites. But it is in some ways harkens back to an old style of making wine, where you didn't seek the oak note so much. It was really more an expression of the fruit and the vintage. This is the third year that we've made this wine, so we're still learning. But it is aged in amphora, which I've got to give a shout out to Melanie. Thank you, Melanie, because Cana used to use amphora, and we purchased them from Cana. We've been using them. So it's great to see you, and cheers.
Yeah, so just about the wine, the grapes, we purchased the grapes from Timberville, from Bear Ridge Vineyards, which is located in the Shenandoah Valley. And basically, I mean, like, the winemaking is very, it's quite, there's nothing too much to it. So basically, it's like this steam crushed, goes to tank, goes through fermentation, alcoholic fermentation with punch down, done every day, and then it's pressed. And only we use only the free run for that wine. And it goes back to stainless steel tank for the malolactic. And it was in stainless steel for 2 months. And after we rack it off and put it in amphora for another 2 months before bottling. So it's, yeah, that was pretty much. And so, yes, again, no sulfite added at any point in the winemaking. So, yeah, and that's why you have the mention on the label that say no sulfite added and contains only naturally occurring sulfite.
And it's been interesting from a winemaking point of view to work without sulfites. Mostly for me, we did a bleeding on this wine of about 300 liters, which represents 10% maybe. Yeah. And the uptick of color, or the uptake of color on the wine seemed to occur much more rapidly than in the reds that we produce, conventionally, adding sulfite. So that was very interesting to see. And also, of course, the fermentation itself will kick off much quicker if you're not adding sulfites to the must. So it's a different animal in the winery, and it's been fun for us, kind of experimentally, to do things a little bit differently.
And guys, oh, sorry.
I also think it's a different animal in the bottle, in that it changes much more quickly in the bottle. My recollection of past vintages was that, like, every 3 months I would taste it, and it would taste like a totally different wine, and it would change in very neat ways in a compressed aging.
It has changed in my glass, or I guess in the sample bottle. so much from when I opened it. It seems like it was a little carbonated. Did you guys do like whole cluster on it?
No, but a very short aging, so there is certainly dissolved CO2.
Yeah, it's still like alive.
February.
That's exactly the word I was going to use. It's that there's a lot of life to it. A lot of, it's very much alive in the bottle. Maya, what do you think?
For your fermentations, are you using like any sort of ambient start, or just kind of letting it be, and then when it starts, it starts?
No, we use commercial yeast, yeah. So
usually like we put like yeast in the first lot, and then we do some. Yeah. So we actually put like yeast in the first batch, so like the first white, or actually this year it was sparkling.
Yeah.
And we use the juice that is fermenting, and we put it in the next wine to start the fermentation, and etc. etc. So yeah, it's but it is
a commercial yeast.
It's a commercial yeast. It's like it's like the sparkling neutral yeast. You know, so
it's the same one that I sprinkled in the corner of your barrel room.
That explains so much.
It's the ones that, you know, we forgot to buy yeast, so we go to Blanheim and we steal a little bit of yeast from Kirsty. So to start the first fermentation.
Guys, Nancy Bauer has a question, and hi, Nancy. She asked what role you play, could tell what role Tim plays, what role Peter plays at the winery.
Welcome to the family winery.
So I drove to the Shenandoah Valley and picked up the grapes and brought them back to the winery. That was me.
Yeah, and you were there also processing. We were all there processing.
We all
the
processed.
grapes.
We all processed together.
Yes.
I did probably all of the punch downs, or
Yeah.
99% of the punch downs.
Yeah.
I took the truck back to Penske.
And you pressed
pressed.
the grapes, and I guess we there was I don't know if I was the one writing from amphora, I don't know, but and
I flipped over the amphora.
yeah, you flipped over the amphora for me because it's very, very heavy and it's difficult to wash.
Oh no, where'd they go? Come back.
Yeah, so I don't know where we were, but I guess we do bottling in house. So usually we have to be like 4 people on the bottling line, and I don't remember who was on the bottling line. I'm pretty sure I was on the bottling line, but I don't remember who else that day. So
Cattell worries about the wines the most, so she's probably the winemaker.
yeah. So if it's bad, it's my fault. Yes, let's put it that way.
Nancy, that might not have been the way you expected your question to be answered. But I think there's a lot of truth to it.
But I have to say, grape transportation is the worst part of
Yes.
winemaking.
Thank you, Rachel.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much, guys. So moving to Daniele, you've been a little too quiet.
I'm one of those Italians who doesn't talk much.
And, you know, I know that I've said I'm so honored for each of these wines to be, you know, offered to us for this club because they're all limited production wines. But one of the amazing things about Barboursville is that you guys have had the foresight to squirrel away, you know, some wines to be able to showcase really how age-worthy the wines of Virginia are. And so I was so happy when you and Luca offered up 30 cases of this 2014 reserve from the library. I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. And we're asked all the time, you know, as people working in wine, how long should I age this? And you never quite know what to tell people when you don't know if they've had much experience with wine with, you know, not that this has so much bottle age, but about 8 years of bottle age. Or 7 years of bottle age. So I'm so thrilled that we have the chance to bring people a taste of a wine very much still in its youth, but starting to show some of that wonderful development.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is our Merlot Reserve 2014. And this one has been in bottle since about February 2017, so about 5 years now. I felt a little bit earlier, I felt a little bit like a reverse iconoclast, because in all these native fermentations, no sulfites, we actually do all of that, plus we harvest by machine everything, or almost everything, including the grapes for this wine. So 2014 was a very balanced, very classic vintage, as I would describe it for Virginia. We had only a very mild late frost, which didn't really impact us much that year. And then the rest of the season was actually very, very balanced. Never too hot. From mid-August on, the nights were actually quite cool in 2014 for us. Never above, if I remember right, we never went above 87 or 88 that year on our sites. And not very rainy at all, but not too dry either. So it was very, very balanced year, very classic year. And so we had quite a bit of Merlot, a lot more than what we ended up using in our Octagon, which is a red blend, which is based on Merlot grapes. And so with part of one of the two vineyards that we use for Octagon, which sits a little bit higher elevation, we decided to make a little bit more of this Merlot Reserve that we make in what we consider very good vintages. So this is a Merlot, it's 100% Merlot, machine harvested, fermentation and maceration in stainless steel. Nothing too remarkable in terms of things that we did, very standard. The grapes were very, very ripe, very healthy. We didn't over extract. Maceration was done for about about a month. So we did about 12 days of fermentation and then another 2.5 weeks of further maceration on the skins for a bit more extraction. And then 12 months in oak. We didn't use any new oak in here. So barrels were between second passage and 5 years old on average. And then on this one, we did a little bit longer stainless steel aging for the simple reason that we still had the previous vintage and I didn't have to bottle it. And so I didn't. So we kept it in stainless steel for about a further year and a couple of months after barrel aging. And so it went in bottle around February 2017. And now, and we started, actually, we released it a few months after that. And now it's been in bottle for about 5 years, and we've had it in our library basically ever since. So for people that have tasted this wine in the past 5 years, they've seen some changes, as you were saying, Aileen. It's starting to get some of those tertiary notes, especially aromatics wise, a little bit of more earthy notes, a little bit of braised meat notes, but still very fresh tasting. I like how the acidity is still there. There's some fresh fruit components still there. And so it's a wine that it's aging quite well, and we're quite happy to be able to see it aging at the winery and basically see it almost weekly being used by our customers, and who can give us some feedback as well. So it's a pretty cool thing that we're able to do. Again, there's not much more to it in terms of technology or some different approaches than the usual winemaking, except for great vintage, great vineyard work, great grapes, and then relatively easy after that. So yeah, one thing that I wanted to mention before, if anyone has questions, this Merlot comes from, I mentioned, a bit higher elevation. So I am about 900 feet this vineyard. The main vineyard that we use for our octagon, where we get more black fruit aromatics, a bit more tannins. The elevation is about 650 feet in there. So this is a bit higher. Merlot ripens a little bit less sugar at ripening, a little bit less color, a little bit less tannins. But what we like as a component for our octagon is the freshness that it brings, especially in terms of a different set of aromatics. So we use that vineyard alone for this wine, and so I think you get a little bit more of that fresher style or cooler climate style Merlot rather than a concentrated, jammy, very soft, very broad Merlot.
Yeah, the acidity is really quite driving and really beautiful in it. I also get, and it's really, it must be tertiary development, this really beautiful integrated smokiness, like kind of a almost like a, you know, a little bit of baking spice or nutmeg, but kind of the smokiness. And so I'm surprised to hear that there's no new oak, because in my head I was saying, oh, that must be from the oak aging.
Yeah, no, so our barrels tend to be a bit, they're medium toast, but they tend to be pretty spicy in terms of aromatics. And so even working with a wine that was a little bit more gentle in terms of its aromatics, probably that 20-25% of second passage barrel was enough to give some of that spice. And part of it probably comes from also some of the aging as well.
Wonderful. I'll open it up to the other winemakers to share some thoughts and if there's any questions from the club members.
I do have a question. Daniele, where do you store all your bottled wine?
Warehouse. We have a pretty large warehouse.
On site?
On site, yeah. It's basically, it's the same square footage as our vinification area. So it can contain quite a bit of bottled wine, but it's all on site, yeah.
And how much do you hold back of?
It depends on the wine and on the vintage. So this Merlot here, we didn't really hold it back. We started selling it. We made a lot of it, and we only sell it on premise. And so we just kept selling it. We never took it off of our wine list at our library tasting room. For Octagon, for example, in a very good vintage, sometimes we hold up to 6,000 bottles for further aging.
Cool, that's impressive.
Yeah, it's a hard decision to hold wine back always. We've started doing it, but not at the 6,000 bottle level.
Yeah, it's Virginia lends itself and how our customers in general, for all the wineries, I think is the same. It's an area that lends itself for this kind of experimentation, if you want, because people are very interested in tasting something new, not necessarily in terms of grapes or styles, but just something that you don't usually see on the market, which is an older bottle. Even usually in restaurants, in grocery stores, you don't have really that option. So having the option of doing that at local wineries, people in here are very interested in that. And you just have to look at it. For us, you just have to take the courage and do it. Start doing it 7, 8, 9, 10 years before you think you're going to be opening a place where you're going to serve those wines. You just have to start ahead of time, keeping them, and then the product is good, you'll have a good return on your investment for sure.
I would
Yeah.
imagine too, with like you're being able to hold back wines like that, maybe has it changed your style and how you're working with certain, parts of vineyards because you can watch them evolve versus like, oh no, I didn't save this. You can kind of refer back to what you did years ago and, that's influencing how you're going forward.
Well, I mean, sometimes you do wish you went back and did some things differently, because then after a few years, you kind of taste that in the wine. But often, usually no. So the thing is, we don't, of course, we don't do it blindly. We have some wines that we sell all of them. Are lower price wines. They're made in a style where the wine is meant to be consumed, young, and because of the vineyard, because of the production per acre, because of the type of clone we have, and a lot of other reasons. And then when you have your sites, your vineyard sites that consistently produce a high standard of quality, you don't really have to change much in terms of what you do. You at that point, you decide to make a high-end wine, and you know that wine is also going to have potential for aging. Talking about red wines. White wines, it can be different. Sometimes we did hold back on some of those. Right now we have Sauvignon Blanc from 2014. We still have Viogniers from the mid 2000s, and sometimes that pays off, and other times it doesn't, because with whites it's a bit vintage is a lot more an influence on the way that wine is going to age. But in general, we don't, make certain wines just for the aging and others for not from the same vineyard, at least. Or we don't change the way we work a certain vineyard for those different kinds of expectations. But the vineyard side definitely has a big impact. Actually, it's the main impact on whether you'll be able to age something successfully or not.
I think that's the reason why this is such an interesting wine for me, is because 2014 wasn't a great year. Like, it wasn't a bad year, but it wasn't a great year. So this is like just a very interesting one to have that much in reserve of, to be able to share it with people. Like, I've tasted my 2014s that I put away, but I haven't really tasted anyone else's 2014s.
And as I said, I feel like it's just kind of at the start of its aging curve, where it's showing those really interesting tertiary notes, but it's still youthful, it's still fruit led. And so I wanted to address, there were a few different questions. One was how long each of the red wine makers would recommend their wines be held before drinking. So Daniele, I don't know if you have a perspective on where this wine is right now, how long you would keep holding onto it. I mean, it's definitely an it depends answer.
So on the back label of this wine, whoever did the phrasing of the back label wrote 6 to 8 years from the vintage. That was our suggestion for a good of enough bottle aging. We are now 8 years from the vintage, so I mean, you judge it. That was our expectation when we bottled that wine. It was about 8 years from the vintage was going to be kind of the peak and a very good time to enjoy it. But I think I don't see signs of this wine being on its way down. So and the corks that we use here, which is another very key aspect, and that's why I don't like natural corks, for example. The corks we use here are quite good. So I think another 6 to 8 years, it should show quite well. and of course it's going to change, but it's probably going to keep the level of quality, I think, in a different way.
Yeah, and for the Vino del Bosco, what would you recommend?
I mean,
Oh, for me or
No, for the
Oh, okay, sorry, because I didn't hear them. Sorry.
sorry.
no, certainly this would be one that should be consumed. We try to do enough production to last a year, and this is a 2021. So the hope is that it will be consumed before the new vintage is ready.
And then time to get the new one. Awesome. And let's see, I remember there were a few other just quick questions. Oh, Nancy just commented. And for anyone who has not been to the Barboursville Library, it is such a treasure to be able to go and taste wines in a variety of different, stages of development. So make sure you visit them. And it really is amazing that Barboursville is holding back more wine from certain vintages than many Virginia winemakers make of any one wine. So it really takes, as you said, courage, definitely discipline. So thank you for doing it. All right, well, wonderful. I know we've already run a little bit long. Does anyone have any other questions before? I'm sure, Rachel, you have kids to put to bed. I know other folks probably do too.
I think they're down.
Oh, magic. So just keep drinking wine. Any other questions?
Hey, Eileen. I think Holly and I would just like to say thank you for putting this club together. Megan, thank you for taking over and helping to manage it. Justin, Melanie, Maya, Daniele, Tim, Cattell, Peter, Rachel, thank you for making wines that we're proud of and that we give to our guests when they come to our house. So just thank you.
Awesome. Well, I couldn't think of a better close than that. So we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Eileen.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.